Session number 4, being a people of hope. Bringing it around full circle. And once again, we're not to the end of the day yet, but I'd love to show some appreciation to Curt Thompson for being with us today. So appreciative. I also want to take a moment as you're getting to your seats to shout out the brains behind the operation and the person who does so much work all year round to make this happen, and that's Maria Schasberger. She's standing back there. She hates attention, so stare at her, wave, clap. Thank you, Maria, for everything. Maria was actually the original brainchild of Compelled and the whole idea of gathering pastors and leaders together. So we're grateful for her. And then she's been helping run it for the last 7 years and doing a fantastic job. Great. I think we're all gathered and settled and ready for Dr. Curt Thompson to join us again.
Well, welcome back. So we've been through 3 movements. In what story do you believe you're living? Acknowledging that we are people of great desire, and out of this comes God's vision for who are we to be in the world, and what is the world itself to be. And we've acknowledged that we are people of great grief, that this whole enterprise of becoming queens and kings on the earth to co-rule with God has been short-circuited by evil who cannot tolerate beauty and goodness. And so we have this experience of evil wielding shame and trauma, turning us into people who tell stories in such a way that we forget that our story actually began in the beginning. And even as we do this meaningful, redemptive work in ministry, there are ways in which shame's tentacles still want to wrap itself around who we are and what we're doing. And so we are reminded in this way that we are people of the second wound. We're people of the second wound. What was the first wound of the Bible? What was the first wound? Okay, well, I got a number of shy temperaments here. It's killing the animal. Okay, right. I want to draw our attention to Genesis chapter 2. It's not good for the man to be alone. And God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And God took from the man a rib. And he closed up the place with flesh. And he brought the woman to the man, and the man, paraphrased, bursts forth with poetry and song. Because that's what it is. It's a poetry. It's a poem, right? Like poetry and song. Flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. It is a poem in the 2nd chapter of Genesis. God performs general surgery in Genesis chapter 2. It is the first wound. Are you with me? How many of us have considered, oh my gosh, ever before, that the first wound of the Bible is committed by God? The difference is the purpose behind it. Because the wound leads to beauty and goodness. The wound leads to poetry and song. How many of us have wounded our children on the way to their becoming more of who they are intended to be? Our children are indignant with the wounds we have cast upon them. How dare you not give me juice when I demand it? Right. This is what it means for us to create safety for our children. We restrain them. We keep them from doing things. We do things to prune them. We do things to bring them into places of greater beauty and goodness in the world. We intentionally, initially, were people of the first wound. But now, we are people of the second. Because when you get to Genesis chapter 3, with all of our wounding, with all of our shame, with all of our trauma, you get to Genesis chapter 4, and we are reminded that shame is violent, even in the slightest raise of the eyebrow, even in the tone of voice. It is an act of violence. It is an act of violation. It is an act in which I am trying to do something to protect myself that in its wake disintegrates you. And this is where we now live. But that, my friends, is not the end of the story. That we are people of the second wound is God just getting started. Because from the very beginning of the second wound, he's already doing things to cover them, right? He covers the first couple. And by the time we get to Jesus, we discover that something else is going on. We discover that God is coming to dwell with people increasingly, more and more and more in incarnate ways. We would say that for us to be people of the second wound, and that it does not end there, is also a testimony to the fact that the entire arc of the biblical narrative is one that is moving continually from imagination to incarnation. What do we mean by that? Imagination, incarnation. The patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, only would have known of God as the fear. They didn't even have a name for him yet. They didn't have Yahweh yet. That doesn't come until Moses. The fear. There's this thing that, oh yes, we have these three guys that show up with Abraham and then are on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah. They're going to have some kind of embodiment, but they don't stick around for very long. Right? There's this sense in which Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they don't have a clear sense of who this God is. You get to Moses and now you have a name. Right? The name makes something a little more incarnate. And then we get to Sinai. And now God comes with a pillar of fire and cloud, right? Right? Increasingly material. Then we get to the tabernacle, increasingly material. Are you tracking? Then you get to the temple, increasingly permanent and material. Are you with me? And then things go really, really badly. And the temple is sacked. They build it again. And then you get to John chapter 2. And Jesus says, tear down this temple and I will what? And we rebuild it in 3 days. Like, I am the temple. I am the temple. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is what part of what gets him killed, right? I am the temple. And we think, oh my goodness, God is finally fully incarnate. And you have to remember, you read the whole Bible and you're like, he's not done yet. Because then you get to Pentecost. And now the Spirit is coming. Jesus says, if I don't go, y'all, like the Spirit can't come. Because if I don't go, James and John and Peter and y'all are going to still be coming to me and complaining to me about the other guys in the crew. This is what you're going to do. You're going to come to the pastor and complain about the other elder board member. It's like, if I don't go, y'all are going to remain infants. You're not going to work it out with each other, which is what I want you to do. I want you to grow up. Just like our original plan was, we took a couple, we put them in the garden. They were immature. They were underdeveloped. We gave them one thing. One thing. They had a hard time with this. You've been having a hard time with these things ever since. We have a hard time with ourselves. Are you with me? And so then what happens? We come to Pentecost, and Jesus is saying, I want you to be the body. And then you get to 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, and you're the body of Christ. What is Paul doing here? Remember, in the Greco-Roman world, the body was completely utilitarian. Yes, great artwork about the body. But if I'm a Roman citizen and I want to, I can have, and you're not, I can have sex with you if you're a man or you're a woman anytime I want, wherever I want, however I want. Because your body is a tool. That's what we think about the body. Are you with me? You're just a tool. And Paul comes along and says, actually, Your body is being remembered because it was out of the mud that God starts his vision in Genesis chapter 2. This is why we're going to call the very thing that the Romans and Greeks want to abhor, we're going to call it the very thing where God lives. And as it turns out, God is not just the fear. God is not just a cloud. God is not just a tabernacle or a temple. God is not just his son. You are the gospel. When you walk into a room, the question is not, will I be a witness for Jesus? The question is, my goodness, how will people's lives change because they see my countenance and Jesus is all they can think about? But I can't do this if I have unfinished, unrepaired ruptures in my life that are begging for all of my energy. I cannot do this by myself. Are you with me? And so, even though we are people of the second wound, what we see that the scriptures are doing are telling us it's because of this that Jesus comes, not back from the resurrection as a perfectly embodied human being, but he comes with his scars. He comes to Thomas in John 20, and he says, here you go. I'm not going to be like all the Romans and all the Greeks and all the Egyptian like myths. I'm coming with my scars. I'm coming with my vulnerability. I'm coming, and this will be how the world will know that you are mine. That I'm going to send you just like the Father sent me. And how did the Father send me? The Father sent me in an embodied and relational process, just like you are. Vulnerable, naked, unashamed, creating beauty and goodness with others who are not like me. And I want you to go and do the same. And you go and do the same by revealing your wounds to people. You're like, that is just like not very smart. This is what it means for Jesus to do the work of his Father and remind us that his mission from the first 2 pages of the Bible has never stopped. He's trying to get us to remember what we've always been about. It is our shame and our trauma that causes us to forget. And so, we are called to come together to remember who we are. That yes, we are people of the second wound, but because of Jesus, we began as people of the first wound, and because of Jesus, the second wound is healed, and we are now recommissioned to be people who are the Word of God in the world with everything that I say and do and breathe. Are we going to do this perfectly? Absolutely not. I love what Leslie Newbegin says in his commentary on the Gospel of John when he talks about the disciples, and he says, therefore we see that in their witness, that even though it is imperfect, it is not ineffective. Jesus is not worried that he has turned this over to us. He's not worried about this. I'm thinking, I think he should be. How many of us here have children that we worry about? Yeah. I have a son who, he's 31, has lived a radiant life. And in 2020, he headed to California from Washington to start a PhD program, and all the wheels came off. This is a guy whose everything he has done has turned to platinum. And he went to California and found himself overwhelmed, and this is a guy who never asked for help. This is a guy who never came to us and said, I need this guy who's traveled all over the world, done all kinds of things. He has enough self-assurance for 10 people, right? Where his mother and I are looking like, I don't know where he got this from, because it's like. And when we got the call that things were not, and we're discovering things are not okay, one Friday night, we don't even recognize this kid. And we figured we'd get on a plane, we're going to go to LA, and we're going to stay for 2 or 3 days, and we're going to help patch things up because that's the guy that we know. We stayed for 7 weeks. There were nights when my wife and I would go to bed, and I was not confident that he would be alive in the morning. I've never been more frightened, never been more overwhelmed with a felt sense of powerlessness. And You want God to do something. And you want him to have done something yesterday. And it's not happening. And I can say, thanks be to God, that Nathan is in a very different place. And he's in a place in which he's developed resilience that is now of 10 men, but only because of the suffering that he experienced. But I will tell you that when I'm in that space as the parent, Jesus does not seem worried enough about my boy. And I'd like to know where the hell he is. I'd like to know, when is God going to show up? And we're grateful that Nathan has done the work that he's done, and now he's in a very, very different place, and we can be grateful, but I can tell you, there was no guarantee. By the way, I don't know if you know this, there is no such thing as a guaranteed good outcome before the new heaven and earth arrives. But we live in a world who thinks that we should be able to guarantee that. We live in a world that thinks that we shouldn't have to suffer. We live in a world that thinks that, like, pain just means there's something wrong with the world, and the world needs to correct itself, so I don't have it. But if we're going to be Jesus followers, we can be assured that the very road running to the light is going to be hard on our eyes. Suffering is what happens if you have a pulse. It is not what happens if you somehow just haven't gotten everything right. If you only go back and figure things, if I'd only gone to a different seminary, and I've only had to enter into a different marriage, if I only done this different thing with my kids when they were really young, if I hadn't been working so hard, all the regrets, all the things, all of where evil wants to take all of what we are about being a people of grief and remind us, you're only people of the second wound. This is what evil is bound to do to us. And then we have a man named Paul who comes along and he writes this letter to the church at Rome. And as it turns out, we have some words from him in the 5th chapter that when we read those words and we pay attention to them in light of some of the things that we learn about how the brain works, about how neuroscience works, we learn some things about suffering. Here's some things that we learn off the top. The first thing we learn is that suffering happens for 3 reasons. This is not just because it's in the text. We know that this happens for 3 reasons. Suffering is this. In medical literature, we would say that suffering, which is what we do, is our response to pain over time. Suffering is a human's response to pain over time. I can have a severe pain if it only lasts for 10 seconds. It's just not that much suffering. I can have a very, very small pain, and if it lasts for 10 years, it's a problem. Suffering is my response to pain over time. Now, interestingly enough, for humans, it turns out that humans suffer like no other creature. You might look at an animal that appears to be suffering. I can guarantee you that part of why the animal is not suffering like humans do is because animals do not have the level of consciousness that we have. It doesn't mean that they're not in pain. It means that they don't suffer in the way that we do. We don't have evidence of that, at least. That's what we can say from a scientific standpoint. We don't have any evidence that animals suffer like human beings do because we have certain ways of being conscious of things, and there are 2 ways about this that are important. One is how we tell time. We can imagine a future in which my pain is not going to go away, and that's part of what doubles back and adds to my suffering. And the other way that I suffer, which is the key element of suffering, is the degree to which I find myself with my pain by myself. It's not good for the man to be alone. It's not good for the woman to be alone. It's not good for us to be alone. When my pain is experienced over time in isolation, my suffering increases, not just because I have pain, not just because of the amount of time and because of how I tell the time story going forward. It is because I'm alone. That's the nature of suffering. I suffer for 3 reasons. Number 1, because of things that have happened to me. My uncle abused me for 7 years while I was a kid. The church elder abused me. I've been mistreated by church leaders. I've been all the things, like, right? My father left when I was 6. My mother was an alcoholic. We have about 120 people here in the room. We have 120 different stories of suffering. Now, we're tempted to think sometimes, well, suffering doesn't really, gosh, the first thing I want to do, my suffering isn't like somebody else's suffering. And so my suffering now, therefore, doesn't really mean anything. You understand what I mean? We do this all the time because I can look around and compare my suffering to somebody else. Mine suddenly doesn't really matter, which is exactly what evil wants you to think. Which means you're not going to pay attention to it, which means you're not going to allow your community by whom you're being seen, soothed, safe, and that fourth one, secure, which I eventually remembered, right? Because they're not going to see this, which means I'm going to end up burning energy containing that, and that will be energy that is not available for God to use with me to create the works that he's waiting for me from before the foundation of the world. Are you with me? Things that happen to me. Secondly, I suffer because of things that I do to myself. By far, we suffer the most because of this. Yes, something happened to me when I was 10, when I was 15, when I was 20. But now I replay it in my head over and over and over and over and over again, and I become the source of the repeated story of what happened to me. And so I now become a collaborator. And the reason that I continue to do it in this way, without even knowing that I'm doing this, is because I'm left alone with my story. And because no one else can ask me any questions by whom I can be known, because then I become my sole author of my story. And we know that when we try to tell our stories by ourselves, we get ourselves into trouble. This is why Jesus has to come. Hey, y'all are telling a story about who you think you are. You think you're people of the second wound. I got news for you. It's good. Right? Third reason we suffer is this. We suffer when we decide that we're going to follow the king. Because if you're going to follow the king, it means you're going to give up your addictions. And you're going to choose to hold your tongue when you want to. I love that I'm married to a woman to whom I can speak so that over the years I have not committed too many felonies against my children. Look, this is not being recorded, right? No? No. Okay, can you edit this out? Every parent should be given the right to kill their child at least once. But because we believe in the resurrection. Okay, but here's the thing. It's only once. So you have to choose your time carefully. But this is what we are called to, right? This is a refinement process. It was a test for the first couple. They were given this choice to test them. Not like test like my physics test. It says it is to refine them. It is to strengthen them. You go to the gym to put more weight on the bar in order for you to become a better athlete so that when you go onto the floor, you will be seen, yes, you want to play for the University of North Carolina. This is what you want to do. Because you want to get better and better because Jesus is trying to get us ready for things. Here's the thing. We think, no, you won't answer this theologically this way. No, of course you don't believe this, but this is how we live. We live as if God is really most interested in what we are doing for him. We live as if I got to get this right. If I don't do this, God's going to be upset, somebody's going to fail, this person's going to end up killing themselves, all the things that we feel like we're responsible for doing. It is not that we are not being called to do things. It is that we forget that God is mostly first. Before we do that, he is first interested in turning us into people. The question is not what am I doing? The question is who am I becoming? And if I choose that I want to become like the king, if I'm going to become living, breathing, pulsating, fruit of the Spirit, if I'm going to be becoming a living, walking Sermon on the Mount, then I'm going to suffer because I don't want to pray for my enemies. I'm so glad there are only 10 commandments. I'd never leave the house. My confession time every morning would be taking so long. Are you with me? I'm a professional sinner. I'm not just good at it. I've been good at it for a long time. And if this is the case, there will be suffering. There are those in this room who've been called to take certain actions that has meant that your family has scorned you. There are people in this room who have called to take certain actions that get you into trouble with the government. People are called to take certain actions that make it hard for you to be around others that you thought were going to be your close friends. And what does Jesus say? I came to bring a sword, as it turns out. And the sword is going to divide people. And the sword is going to divide parts of you from other parts of you. And it's going to separate parts of you. And it's like, these are parts of you that have not yet come into the light that I'm going to take to the gym to work them out. Are you with me? And so we suffer in this way. But here's the good news when Paul writes about it. So one thing to know that, the Christian story is the only story in the world that honors suffering. It dignifies suffering. Eastern ethics, Eastern metaphysics will look at suffering and we're just going to make it a figment of our imagination. Western metaphysics want to make it a thing of the past. We're going to do everything we can to get rid of it. The Christian story looks suffering right in the face and says, this is the world that we really live in. We're not leaving the world. We're not leaving the room. We're going to come and absorb it. We're going to come and be with it, such that the world itself that is groaning will be brought into a new and beautiful space. And so, if we are the gospel, if we are little Christs, right? This is Antioch, right? When they were first called this, little Jesuses. If this is who we are, then this is what's going to happen to us. Not just because of things that will happen to us, but because of decisions that I'm going to make to restrain parts of me that would rather kill my children than not. Or all the other things that we would want to do. I'm going to not look at pornography. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. All the things that we're being asked to do. I'm actually going to be a person who honors the Sabbath. I'm like, let that work on me. I'm going to do these things because Jesus is trying to turn us into people. It is hard for us to become Christians. Soren Kierkegaard was once asked, are you a Christian? He said, I'm trying to become one. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's my answer. Kurt, are you a Christian? I know what my head says, but if you look at my life, I'm not so sure. I'm trying to get there. Yes, you can quote Calvin. I get it, okay? But I think you follow me. Paul comes along and says this about suffering. Notice, you're all familiar with this passage from Romans chapter 5. For suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope what? Does not disappoint or does not put us to shame. And we think that's where that all begins. Suffering leads to perseverance, leads to character, leads to hope. And it does. That's true, but that's not where it begins. It begins 3 verses earlier in the opening line. Therefore, since we've been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom, by faith, we have obtained access to this grace in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Moreover, we glory in our suffering, because suffering produces perseverance and character and hope does not put us to shame, because the love of God has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. In the last 3 minutes, here we go in this passage. Number 1. Because we've been justified by faith. What is faith? Faith is trust, and trust is about attachment. Trust is about attachment. We could talk for 3 days about attachment and the fact that if I'm not securely attached, it will be very difficult for me to have a felt sense in my chest that I'm loved by God. By whom and to whom are you securely attached? I'm justified by my attachment to a God by whom I'm loved, by whom I'm seen, right? This is the verse on your table. By whom I'm seen. Because we've been justified by faith, we have peace through God. What are the parts of you that still believe that you are at war with God? I will guarantee you there are parts of you, there are parts of me in this room right now that do not believe that you are at peace with God. You believe that God is coming to kill you just like Adam thought that God was coming to kill him in the garden. We have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we've obtained access to this grace in which we now stand. This standing, this notion that grace is not a thing that is a theological term. First, it is first an embodied experience. Imagine Paul gets thrown off his horse, right? This is a cat who has spent the last several, who knows, days, weeks, months, years, killing Christians and putting them in jail. And he gets thrown off his horse, and then he's told, yeah, I'm taking you to the house of a Christian. And Paul's like, crap, I'm a goner. You know what I mean? And of course, Ananias gets the message, hey, Saul's coming. And Ananias is like, crap. Right? Until he gets there, and Ananias does what? He prays for him. He houses him. He feeds him. He cares for him. I want to tell you, if I'm Saul, I did not see this coming. When you want to talk about grace, long before grace was a theological concept for Saul, grace was a thing in which Saul's very life passed before his eyes, blinded though they were, and he found himself still alive. Because somebody was loving him that he thought would surely find a way to kill him. Are you with me? Grace first has to be felt here before I talk about it from the pulpit. What are the parts of us that believe that we're still at war with God, that have not sensed it, imaged it, felt it? Because I can't give to my parishioners, I can't give to those who have mental health problems, the very thing that I don't yet have. Moreover, we have glory. Okay, I know that I'm going to run out of time. Can I give 5 more minutes? Okay. I yield my time to the congressman from Virginia. Okay. Moreover, we boast in the glory, the hope and the boast of the glory of God. Or we've talked earlier, like some of you own dogs, right? And you've committed to me that you do not put clothes on them, right? We've gotten that far. We committed, okay, so far. Yeah, you're not. I know you do, don't you? Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay. When you come home from work, if your dog is not like 17 years old, when you come home from work, do you get the sense that your dog is glad to see you? And how do you know that your dog is glad to see you? Wagging their tail. They're jumping all over the place. They're doing all these like wild and crazy things, right? Because they're so. And you think that the dog is happy to see you for you. Right. That is what we call a delusion. A continued belief in something that is verifiably false. The dog is not primarily excited to see you. The dog is primarily excited to have the experience of your delight in it. That's what the dog is looking forward to. The dog is looking forward to your delight in it as its creature. Are you with me? Have you all read C.S. Lewis's sermon, The Weight of Glory? When he talks about this, right? That a dog's greatest glory is in its awareness of its master's pleasure in the dog's presence. I want to tell you, we have a hard time being open to and receptive to the glory of God. When you read Leslie Newbegin's take on the glory of God in John, look, the glory of God means lots of things. Yes, it does mean God's omnipotence, God's power, God's beauty, God's grandeur, all the things that are all true. There is a particular element of his glory that John's gospel highlights, and that is this deep, mysterious, mind-blowing love connection between the Father and the Son. This is my son. This is my boy. How many of us, you woke up this morning, did you see them? The Holy Trinity in your bedroom? No. Tomorrow you look for them, because I will tell you they were there. You woke up and they're like, we've been waiting for you all night. We can't believe that we get to live today with you, because you are our delight. Will we be able to tolerate heaven when we get there and God picks you out of the crowd and is like, I got about 3 million people I want you to meet, and I'm going to introduce you to each one of them. We're going to take a long time, which is why we have eternity, and it's just going to happen this way. And you're going to be like so nervous because you're meeting all these people. And God says, no. It's not just that I want you to meet Peter and Paul and James. No, I want them to meet you. Are you with me? How many of us here have any sense of a memory of growing up in a home where this is what we felt coming into the world? I was a source, before anything else, of anxiety. Now, I had two parents who loved Jesus, who loved me, and who were imperfect. But I learned to be afraid of anger. I learned to manage everybody else's anxiety in the room. My psychiatric training began when I was about 4 years of age. I knew that my father and my mother were proud of me and so forth and so on. My father died when I was 17, not having had a single substantive conversation with me about anything. When I was 15, my mother came to me and said, "Your dad asked me a question." He wanted to know why it is, my mom, who was the one who was more willing to talk about spiritual things and all kinds of things, because, she had words. Wait for it. Your dad came to me and said, "Why is it that Curt will talk with you about things that he won't talk with me about?" You get it, right? Even as a 15-year-old, I said to her, you get it, right? Like, why is he not asking me this question? And she said, "Yes, I understand." And nothing was ever said about it. I want to suggest to you that the Holy Trinity, every single morning, every single afternoon, every single night before you go to bed, is imagining that it can't believe its good fortune that it gets to live life with you. And this is the glory of which Paul speaks. And if that's the glory that I'm taking with me into my suffering, it transforms my suffering because I can pay attention to someone coming to find me, even in the middle of my pain that will endure. Who are the people who are coming to find you in your suffering? If I can't name those people, it will be hard-pressed for me to talk with my parishioners about what it means to suffer. But Paul is saying, this is what we do. This is what we Christians do. We come to find each other, such that my suffering is transformed into perseverance. We said earlier at the very start, the brain can do a lot of things for a long time as long as it doesn't have to do it by itself. This is how we persevere, a little bit at a time, practicing neuroplastic change over and over and over and over again. And after a while, we become people of character. And the people of character are the people who have genuine character are the people in the world who believe more than anybody else that they are not people of character. If you say, like, "I'm going to go work on my patience. I'm going to work on being patient," anybody here done that? You're like, "No, I don't want to do that," because, like, I don't want to have to be that, I don't have to work that hard, right? So we go, "I'm going to work on being patient." And you're working. And at some point, somebody comes to you and says, like, "Gosh, you are the most patient person that I know." And you're like, "You have no idea how not patient I am." Because you know your impatience more than anybody. Character is something that happens as a byproduct that other people see to which they are witnesses. It is not a thing that we try to make happen in ourselves. It is a thing that happens as a byproduct of us being loved by others over and over and over and over again. And then we get to this thing of hope. We become people of hope, meaning this. So again, real quick neuroscience. I know I'm over, now by 6 minutes. Okay, here we go. All right. Memory. We remember our futures. We anticipate our future out of our memory. We use our memory networks to remember things. When you stand up to leave here, you're going to have to remember how to walk. You're not going to be aware that you're remembering, but that's exactly what you're doing. Everything that we do into the future, walking across the stage, greeting my parents, all the things are acts of remembrance. But if my acts of remembrance are clouded by unrepaired ruptures, that becomes the future I anticipate that I will have. Hope is a function of a future state that I'm anticipating that happens because I have been in the context of people by whom I'm being seen, soothed, safe, made secure, in the presence of the parts of me that I hate the most that are being revealed, healed, recommissioned in order for me to have a different experience of my suffering, that I anticipate a future in which I see and know that when the trouble comes in the future, I'm not going to be by myself with it. And this is what Jesus says in John 16:33. It's also on your tables. This notion, "I've said these things to you so that in me you will have peace." Notice, he doesn't say, "I've said these things to you so that in my philosophy, so that the facts will give you peace." "I've said these things to you so that in me you will have peace. In the world you will have trouble." The world you live in is a troubled world. That's the way it is. But I want you to pay attention to me. I want the people in this room to be paying attention to those who are coming to help us co-author our stories, so that we are paying more attention to the Jesus that is coming to us through the voices and the bodies of those who are coming to find us than we are paying attention to our shame, than we are paying attention merely to the pain and the story that it wants to write, in order for us to then go on and continue to practice creating beauty and goodness in the world, because God has not forgotten that we are people first of the first wound and not left to be people of the second. All in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Is anyone upset that Curt went overtime? Okay, good. We're going to head out to our rooms. I think there's space for you to reflect on what Curt just shared, but also anything that has come up in your conversations in your time in the first 3 sessions today. We have plenty of time. We're still on schedule, don't worry. The great thing of our planner, Maria, is that we have a break scheduled after this breakout time, and we can just shrink that break by a few minutes and still stay on schedule for you to head home. But the most important thing is there is another session back here after this breakout. I just want to remind you, please, please come back. It's going to be an interactive session. Curt will be leading us again, a chance for some questions to go a little deeper. And so really, please stick around for that and be a part of it. And we're going to head out to our rooms.